Okay, I think we've got everybody here. So hopefully you can see us and you can hear us. We had some issues last time we had a webinar here, so we're going to get started here. And we are very excited that you are joining us this afternoon. My name's Janice Hurley, and I'm the GM of bnbfinder. For those of you that I haven't met, it's nice to meet you. Peter says we're all good. Thank you, Peter. So for those of you that I haven't met, I hopefully we'll meet you very soon at a conference, or hopefully at your inn. Joining us today is Tim Wilson, the director of the bnbfinder Diamond Collection. And we thought we'd start off with a video just so you could see our faces. I know that bandwidth has been an issue in the past, so we're probably going to stop the video as we go in and start the presentation, just to make sure that there aren't any issues with audio and that you can actually see the deck that we're presenting here today. So a couple of things before we get started. We are recording today's session, so we'll be sending you out a copy of the recording after we're done today. You'll be getting it later this afternoon. Also, I did attach a PDF of the slides, and that's in your GoToWebinar panel there. So if there's any issues with the slides and you're not able to see them, you can always just open up that PDF and follow along there.
Hey, Janice, right now we're seeing it looks like just your notes, not the deck.
Yes. I'm going to pull that up in a second.
Okay.
I'll pull it up in the background just so people can see. Okay. That should be easier for people to see. Okay. All right, so if you've attended one of our webinars before, you know that I like to start off with some polls just to get a sense of who's joining us here this afternoon. So the first poll I'm going to launch is to find out if you're currently a member of bnbfinder. And if you could just take a minute to answer that, that would be great. And as we're going through these polls and we're getting the first few answered, I wanted to just give you a little bit of background on the surveys that we have put together and just the logic behind them. And this really started back when we were with bnbfinder.com, and when the recession hit, we started to do quarterly surveys, both to innkeepers and travelers. And it was great because of the size of our databases. Not only do we have a very large database of innkeepers around the US, Canada, we also have a very large database of travelers. So it gives us the opportunity to keep a tight pulse on what's happening. We started our first bnbfinder survey to travelers and innkeepers in March. So right when all of the COVID concerns started to come up, and we thought, okay, this is a great opportunity for us to continue that tradition of being able to share out this information. So we launched the first survey back in March, and because, as you all know, things have been changing so quickly, we decided to run another survey in May so that we could just measure and see if anything had changed over just even those short few weeks and couple of months. So it looks like we've got 86% of you who've responded to that one. The next poll that I'm going to launch is how many rooms that you have, because I went through and took a lot of time actually digging into the data that we had from the surveys to better understand not just, you know, who the inns are that have responded or who the travelers are, but what regions are you located in? How many rooms do you have? Because a lot of the times when you do these types of presentations and innkeepers are looking at the data, they're like, okay, well, that's great, but that might be different if you're a 2-room property versus a 12-room, 20-room inn. So I wanted to get this information just to know from who we have on the call today and what size your properties are. So we've got about 95% of you who've answered. So I'm going to actually share these results with you so that you can see. So on our webinar today of the properties who are joining us, looks like the majority of the properties are anywhere between 4 and 10 rooms. And that is pretty much what we saw in the responses, which I'm going to be sharing with you here in a couple minutes. So that aligns really well with when you're looking at the data that Innkeeper shared. It's the average, I think, was around 7 rooms. So that is very close to what we saw. And then the next one that I'm going to launch is to understand where you are regionally, because I have been doing this for a very long time. And one of the things that I've always wanted to do is to be able to get enough statistical data to be able to report out by region. So as I mentioned, I can share with you the regions that the travelers who responded to the survey, where they are, and where the inns are as well, because it's really important to take that into account anytime that we're talking about data that's relating to inns and B&Bs, because of course all of us are in different seasons. Some of you might be in your shoulder season, some of you might be coming into your peak season or busy season, and it's just important to work that into the results as we're looking at them. So on our webinar today, it looks like we've got a nice blend of properties, 50% from the Northeast, which isn't surprising. We've got a lot of properties who are located up there, and this is fairly close to what we have seen in the results from the Innkeeper surveys. So that is awesome. So before we jump into it, I am going to get some things situated here, and just a couple of housekeeping reminders as we move along today in the session is that because we do have everyone on mute today, because we have quite a few properties joining us from all across the US, please use the questions box that is there on your screen. And that way, Tim's going to be fielding the questions as they come in, and we'll be answering them as they come through. So if there are questions that you have that you would like us to address, we can do that as they fit into the session. And then we also will have a Q&A at the end as well as time permits. So we're going to try and stick to our 1 hour slot that we have here, and are going to kick it off and get started here. So I want to make sure we've got a full screen there and that everyone can see the screen. So looks like that is good.
Looks good, Janice.
Okay, perfect. So it looks like it's loading. Okay, so slide 2. I'm just going to change my view here. I think I might need to actually use my PDF, which I did last time, which is fine. Okay, let's do that. Okay, I'm going to move this over, and I'm going to actually stop my video because I think there might be an issue with the bandwidth, and then the presentation hopefully will be a lot easier for you to see. So I'm going to take that off. Let's move this over and just see if that helps. Okay. I think it still looks like just a small screen, right, Tim?
It was, yeah, it was kind of tucked in the corner there.
Okay. So I'm going to use this PDF previewer. Let's see. I think this will make it a lot easier. Okay. Now can you see it?
Yep.
Okay, great. So as I was explaining briefly before, when traditionally in the past, when we've done different survey presentations, we haven't really dug into the demographics of who responded. So in the Innkeeper surveys that we ran both in March and in May, we had a total of 170 properties who responded, an average of 7 rooms per property, and the average number of years that those properties have been in business was around 17 years. and to understand regionally where they're from, much as represented in our session today and the attendees who are with us today. The largest amount of properties that participated are in the Northeast. Pennsylvania had the largest number of respondents for inns. And the reason why I mention that is because when we do have the opportunity where we have a large enough response from a certain state or a certain region, I'm happy to go in at any time, and especially if there's anyone from a state association or a regional association on the call today, I can go in and actually pull the data that's specific to your region, just to make things even a little bit more focused there. And as far as where folks are in their seasons, the majority of properties are in their shoulder season, which isn't surprising. One thing I did want to mention is that when we ran the Innkeeper survey back in March, there were fewer properties, about 14% less, that were in their peak season. So everyone is well aware that we're starting to turn into that Memorial Day, spring, early summer season, which ends up being a lot of properties' peak seasons as well. On the traveler side, we had 707 travelers that participated. One of the cool things about the data that we're going to be looking at today is traditionally the data that we had shared was really specific to the B&B traveler, because our traveler database was primarily made up of travelers who just used bnbfinder or had booked a room on, if we were running the bnbfinder.com survey. So our traveler database now is blended not only with B&B travelers, but travelers who also stay in other types of lodging. And that's due to some of the marketing efforts that we've put in at bnbfinder to try and reach a broader audience and to understand what travelers are looking for. As far as age demographics, not anything that's too surprising here. Traditionally, our guests and travelers tend to be, in the Gen X, Gen Y, baby boomer age groups. We did have some younger, some millennials who had responded to the survey. So that just gives you an idea when you're looking at the travelers, where they fall within those different age groups. And where the travelers are located, I think that this is particularly interesting and something to take into account as we're looking at how far travelers are going to travel over the next few months. And are they going to be staying closer to home, or are they going to be interested in, one tank getaways, or going to stay somewhere that's more than 150 miles away? There were quite a few travelers who responded that were also from Canada. So it's interesting when, borders open up and travelers can start to expand where they're going to be staying. So I put this slide in here because I've had it in almost every presentation that I've done, starting with the keynote at the PI conference this past year. And back then I had it in there because we were discussing how to get ready for the conference. And we were talking about all the different challenges that we had specifically with Google and competing on the search engines and all types of things. And it still resonates so perfectly well with the challenges that we have with COVID and the coronavirus, because, when I read this, I read it a little bit differently than what it says. I read it as a successful human is one who can lay a firm foundation with the bricks others have thrown at them. And certainly none of us asked for these bricks, and none of us could have ever expected or anticipated them, but it truly is what we do as we receive them and build the foundation for us to move forward as an industry that is going to make all the difference. And we are so fortunate, I can't say it enough, for the amount of support that we have in this industry. I think it's unlike anything else. If you've been following any of the marketing blogs that are coming out, Acorn Internet Services just put out a blog. I actually have a link to it at the end of the presentation. And I just love this visual that they're doing, because there's so much information coming at you right now. And even though, yes, you have time, because a lot of us don't have guests currently staying, but it can be overwhelming. And it can be just like when you start, the very first day of your national conference or your regional conference, and you're trying to decide, what are my goals for the conference? And just really trying to navigate through and decide what the most important things are for you as you're getting ready to start to book more reservations and the guests are ready to travel again. So I thought this was just a great visual that really made it nice and easy to understand step 1, step 2, step 3, and the different pieces that you should be taking into consideration as you're preparing to reopen, or if you are currently open, tools that you can have along the way. And another one that I saw that I thought was great came from Q4 launch. And this was from a video that they put in their newsletter the other day. And Matt, who is the owner of Q4, did a little video. And I thought it was really smart to use the analogy of where innkeepers are right now. And what he was saying was, you know, are you in relation to innkeeping being like surfing? And I've never surfed, so I can't claim to know exactly what this feels like, but in the analogy, it makes perfect sense for anyone. And that is, you know, are you the surfer that's on your surfboard in the water, waiting for that wave of reservations to come? Because they are coming. And what we've seen in our data is supports that. And, you know, you can be that type of innkeeper, or are you the innkeeper that's sitting on the beach and watching the other surfers? And you want to make sure that everything that you're doing right now is preparing you for when the travelers are ready to travel again. And that's why it's imperative as we look at this data and as we start to think about, okay, what are we doing? Are we in the right position? Are we ready to take those guests when they're ready to come? And have we used this time to the best of our advantage? And I think there's so many folks within our industry and outside of our industry that are really looking at this time now as a way for us to grow. And, you know, I looked at my calendar for the summer, and as all of you who do know me personally, I travel a lot, as much as I can, to as many inns, to as many conferences. I try to be out there as much as I can. And I also, in the summer times, work music festivals. And this is the first time since literally I can remember that I don't have anything on my calendar yet. And I'm starting to think of, you know, okay, this is great. You know, can I get in the car and drive up to New England and, you know, work from New England and visit some inns while I'm up there, and just really reevaluating where we're at. And I think it's a common thread that we all share right now as we go through this. So as we start to get into the data, I am going to be launching some other polls as we go throughout the session today, because I think it's great for us to be able to get that real-time feedback as we're going through. So the first piece that I wanted to share with you, this is from the Innkeeper survey. And we asked innkeepers who participated if they've received cancellations due to COVID-19. And of course, everyone has received some type of cancellations, but I think it's really important to put into perspective how much of the future bookings have been canceled, how many travelers are choosing not to travel. And what's interesting is when I looked at the data on the March survey, it pretty much aligns that 75% or more of future bookings have canceled. Now, that being said, we're starting to see some different trends that are coming in that relate to travelers starting to book again for the future. So that's part of what we're going to be focusing on also today as we go through the data. So the majority of properties are seeing bookings cancel within 60 days of arrival. Now, when I put this question in the Innkeeper survey, the way that the data reported back was just way too hard to report on in a visual way for you to be able to conceptualize what the data was saying. So I put this in as a weighted average, which still reflects what the response was. So when we asked innkeepers what percentage of bookings are canceling within each time frame, it's interesting because the majority of those bookings are within 0 to 60 days of arrival. And this doesn't surprise me because, as you know, things are changing so quickly, and I think travelers are really waiting to see, okay, waiting until the last minute to see if, okay, maybe I can still travel in 2 weeks, or maybe something's been lifted. And I think when, when all of this started back in March, there was a real influx in cancellations because there were so many unknowns, and a lot of the response, and you'll see this coming up as far as why travelers chose to cancel, had to do around CDC guidelines and not really understanding if properties were going to be ready. Some had to close due to state regulations. So I think that, this is pretty consistent. I think the positive part of this is that we aren't seeing as many reservations that are being canceled past that 60-day mark. And so they're not looking out as far into the future and saying, okay, I'm going to cancel my trip for October. I think if there is any part of our industry that, if we looked at this from a different data point, it would be reflected in properties who host events or weddings. I've heard from a lot of properties who do host weddings and events that a lot of the couples who've chosen to postpone their wedding are postponing it to next year. They're not canceling it altogether, so properties are still being able to hold on to those deposits. They're just moving it ahead. And for friends of mine who had weddings scheduled this summer, that's essentially what they've done too. I had a friend who was getting married in July, decided to push it off until October. They were going to do a destination wedding, and now they're going to have it here in Texas. So I can definitely see in a future survey to get some more details on properties who specifically host events. I think that would be really interesting. So here, from the traveler survey, we asked travelers, are you changing your travel plans due to COVID? And the highest percentage, again, have canceled some travel plans. So I think it's important to point this out, because when this began to unfold at the beginning of March, rightfully so, there was a lot of concern. There was a lot of misinformation. We would hear from some properties that 100% of their reservations had canceled, but at the same time, they were in their off season and they didn't have very many bookings yet for the remainder of 2020. So there's so many factors that work into it. And that's why when we're looking at this data, I want to try and get as granular as possible so that we are all looking at it in a way that is more reflective of how it is truly affecting properties individually. So one of the hot topics and questions that we've had since this started, and a lot of the marketers in the industry have had, is how do we manage cancellations? So when we asked innkeepers, have you enforced your normal cancellation policy? The majority of them have said no, that they're allowing guests to cancel as they need to, which really is something that is unprecedented, because as small businesses, our cancellation policies are a big part of what protect our business. And I think this is a great story for us to be telling of how flexible and understanding innkeepers have been. And not only for properties who, can't extend the refund back on, say they made a deposit because that isn't normally their cancellation, those properties are also offering, in lieu of that, a gift certificate for a future stay, which I think is a brilliant idea. And what I love about that is that it also relates perfectly to the stat that I'm going to show you about travelers and their travel plans that are coming up. So when we ask properties if they're starting to see more reservations, and this is from the May survey. We actually didn't have this question in the March survey because it didn't make sense at that time to ask innkeepers if they were receiving future bookings and that bookings were starting to come back. But in the May survey, we asked this question, and clearly there is a high percent of properties who are starting to see the bookings again. This is something that Tim and I have both heard over the last several weeks. properties calling, reporting that guests are starting to book. I got some things I'm going to share with you that I thought were some pretty creative ideas on what certain innkeepers have been doing to be able to start to reach out to those guests and let them know, yes, we're open, yes, we're seeing reservations. So I'd like to launch a couple of polls that relate to this specifically. So I'd like to know from everyone who is on the webinar today, if you're starting to see reservations come through. And then we can see how this aligns with the property, with all of you who participated in the survey, but specifically who we have on the call today. So we've got 60% who voted. I'm going to give it a few more minutes. And I'm going to ask a couple more questions that relate to specifically reservations. So if this doesn't seem broad enough for you and you want to add some more information around it, you might be able to do that through these next few polls that I'm going to answer. So it looks like it's pretty close to what we saw in our overall survey with this smaller group. There are fewer properties who are starting to see more reservations come through. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're not seeing any reservations coming through. So the next question that I want to put out is, if you're seeing reservations coming in, where are they coming in from? And you can select all that apply. And the reason why I put this in here is because I know and have heard from several inns that there have been some restrictions, and these are really state-specific restrictions. So for example, the state of Vermont last month, they were requiring lodging properties to take down all of their online inventory for the future and only accept reservations over the phone. And when they initially wrote the addendum to the lodging restriction, which was that, they said that they could only accept relief workers and homeless, and there were a couple other types of categories, but not for guests. And that was for all future reservations. So the Vermont Bed and Breakfast Association went back to the legislature, and they actually got that rolled back so that inns could take future reservations for after the lodging restriction, the deadline for that. So the reason why I asked that is because for anybody who was receiving any bookings, more bookings over the phone, or saw an increase in that, that would make sense to me because of some of the restrictions that had been made. So we've got about 60% who have participated in that. So I'm going to give it one more minute just to see if we get any other responses. Okay, so I'm going to share that out. So this doesn't surprise me. So over the phone, and I do think there's two things. There's what I had noted about the state putting some mandates around allowing inns to take future reservations online. But I also think that this is a trend that's not going to slow down. So, you know, I think back to when we first started in the industry, myself back in 2002, Tim, I think was 1999 or 98, 2000, something like that.
99.
99, there it is. So we used to do presentations about how to increase your telephone reservations, because even though we had a directory and some innkeepers were starting to adopt booking engines on their website, still the majority of bookings came through over the phone. And I think it is a perfect time to bring back and update that presentation to present out to all of you, because there's so many opportunities of over the phone reservations and converting them, and then also understanding where those reservations are coming from. So where the guests are finding your phone number, whether it's listed on a directory that you're listed on, or if it's from your website. And if you have multiple people answering the phone, making sure that they're converting those reservations and that you're tracking the responses of what's happening on those calls, because that is just invaluable data. If, of course, we're going to continue, and we expect to continue to get reservations over the phone. And this question here is, per state regulations, are you allowed to take future reservations? So I put this in here just because of the responses that I had heard from properties who are located in Vermont. Shortly after that, Maine had taken the same approach that Vermont had. They also rolled that back. But I'm really curious to know if your state is still requiring you to not take any future reservations. So any of you who are answering this question who are saying no, I get a report at the end of the webinar, and I'm going to follow up with you specifically because I really want to understand and learn more about what's happening in these states, and really think of some creative ways that we can help support not only the states that are open for business, because it's equally important to share with the travelers, hey, we're open, we're ready to take your reservations, and also for the properties who aren't able to currently take future reservations, and whether or not that's because your property's closed or if that's state mandated. So I'm going to close this poll now and share these results, and this is great. It's with 94% of properties being able to take future reservations. There's a lot that we can do to get creative on our marketing, and we will definitely be reaching out to that 6% who can't take reservations and looking at ways that we can help. So I'm going to go back in here. Let me make sure I've got the right presentation. Okay, great. And I'm going to hide those results. Okay, we should be back in here and you should be able to see my slides now. So for the innkeepers who have started to receive bookings for future bookings, we asked which months they're starting to see them for. A couple of things that I think are really positive about these responses is that, as you can see, clearly the majority of the bookings are being made within the next 6 months. So that means that those travelers who are booking are the ones who have been antsy, who are ready to get out. I can't tell you how many nights I've been thinking about, as many of us have, of, where am I going to go first? Where am I going to travel to first? And for myself, it is out to the Texas Hill Country, because I can very easily hop in my car. I can be out to and in fairly quickly, and it's just the easiest way to travel right now. And I think, and we'll look at the traveler results as well, but travelers are certainly thinking not only about staycations, but even traveling further than they normally would. And I think a big part of that has to do with the extremely low gas prices that we're seeing. The other day, I drove by a gas station here in Austin, and it might not be this low, in other parts of the country, but I literally saw gas for 99 cents a gallon, which I don't think I've seen that since I was in high school. So it's a great opportunity for travelers to hop in their car and to get out and to get onto their travel plan. So, oops, I skipped over one. So when we ask travelers who, when they're ready to start booking, what months are they going to be looking to book for? And this couple of things here. May is only showing at 4% because this question to travelers was, when you book your next reservations, what months do you plan to travel on? So the slide that we just looked at previously was for innkeepers who are receiving reservations, and this is for what future reservations will be booked and when travelers will be looking to book. And it's great, again, because it falls within that the next 6 months mark. And the other thing that I thought was really positive was the amount of guests who are looking towards even winter and early next spring. So, a lot of times there aren't very many inns. I mean, there are some, but I think the larger percentage to have, unless there's an event or there's something that travelers will come in and book up, the whole town for a year in advance, it's unusual for an inn to see bookings that are coming out for next spring. And I am really curious to see if this might be something that we're going to continue to see as a trend, because for travelers who did have spring travel planned for this year, they want to make sure that they get that travel that they had to miss out on this year. And that will be great for our industry because it will really help you be able to forecast your cash flow and to better understand what you're heading into, which can traditionally be a bit of a scary time for properties who are coming out of a slow season and waiting to see those bookings build as they get later into the year so that they can anticipate what's going to happen in early spring. So as we run these surveys, the plan initially was to run them on a quarterly basis, and that made sense years ago. We ran this one in March and then again in May because things had changed so quickly. We are planning to keep the cadence of every quarter, but if we feel that it makes sense to launch another survey and we want to get new data, we can absolutely do that so we can continue to keep a really tight pulse on what's happening and what travelers are responding to. So those who are waiting for CDC guidelines, this is from the travelers when we ask them, when do you plan to book your next vacation? So we know what months they were looking for, but I think what's interesting here and something that we can absolutely respond to is that largest percent that says waiting for CDC guidelines. So certainly we can't change what those guidelines are, but what we can do is do a better job at sharing out the things that inns and B&Bs are doing to ensure the safety, the cleanliness, all of the things that we do that are really appealing to what travelers are going to be looking for. So I wanted to include a couple of ideas in here from things that we've heard from other inns and just some ideas. So if you attended our last webinar, Eric and I actually did one sort of an interview style, and Eric also owns the Inn at Sage Hill, which is just south of Austin in Kyle, Texas. So he shared some of the things that they had been doing. And from the Innkeeper surveys, I have, every innkeeper that responded with some kind of a suggestion. So my goal after the webinar is to put together some of those suggestions in an easy way for you to look at them and see, hey, is this something that I could apply to my inn? I know there's also so many other resources, ALP, Acorn, I believe Whitestone, everybody is putting together these ideas that innkeepers are sharing. But certainly for properties who have great outdoor spaces, marketing that, highlighting that. If you have private entrances, that is huge. Being able to arrive, you can do self-check-in, and that, the guests can go in, they don't have to go through the building to get to a room. If you don't have freestanding private entrances, and your inn is all within one building, you might have something where you're only renting every other room. And whatever it is that you're doing to give that extra sense of safety, that is something that you should absolutely be communicating out in your marketing. Also for how you've adapted for how you're serving breakfast, and if you're delivering it to your room, and how you're dealing with the cleanliness and the deep cleaning of the rooms, and making sure that's obvious and that it is at the front of your marketing. Because if we know the highest percentage of travelers who are still waiting to book are waiting because of the CDC guidelines, that says to me that, if we can do a better job at sharing out that information, then that's only going to help us increase our bookings. So a couple of things, we are currently working on at bnbfinder a cleanliness standards program, and it's something that we're hoping to launch here in the next few weeks, because when you look at when travelers are planning to book and when they're planning to travel, this isn't something that is just going to be a light switch. And I just read an article the other day about how it's of course going to take time to where travelers feel 100% comfortable. So if we can do the best job that we can to share out what we're doing to take precautions and make sure that we're all within these guidelines, it's just going to make it a lot easier. So a couple of things that we did at bnbfinder, and check with any of the listings that you're doing business with whether that's an OTA that you're working with or directory or on your own website, and how you can call out the things that you're doing. So on bnbfinder, the quickest thing that we were able to do, and we just sent this out in our member newsletter, is the About the Inn section that you can see down there on the lower left. Previously, that was just a few lines and we had accordioned it and put a more section, but we just expanded that. So properties can put in their COVID updates into their description, so it's front and center, and travelers can see, what precautions and things that you're doing to adjust to that. And then also, in addition to that, we have added a couple of more sections. And of course, under popular amenities, there's daily housekeeping, there's those types of things. But we recently added on the right-hand side these 3 areas where you can list your awards. So I highly recommend that you go in and you update any awards that you've had. If you've had the Award of Excellence, anything that you've received that would help highlight your property. Inspections, this is huge. If you can go in, put in if you've been inspected by, whether it's Select Registry, whether it is your local state B&B association. This part of the listing we are going to be building out. We have a page I'm going to show you in a minute where we do list those state associations. And you can list any inspections, AAA, anything that you've received. And then below that, I didn't have enough real estate on my screen to show you, but you can list any of the associations that you're affiliated as well. And what's great about that is it builds that confidence for the traveler who's looking to book with you, because they can see very clearly, here's the amenities that they offer and here's everything that they've done, awards, inspections, and they feel more confident when they're going to your website or they're going to your booking engine from bnbfinder because of what you're showcasing here. Also, what we've done and what we're going to continue to do to help get the word out is we are starting a series of press releases. We just ran the first one in April, and this was sent out on the wire. I didn't include how many it was picked up on. It was picked up on over 100 different news channels, digital media, and we wrote it from the perspective of why travelers would want to choose to stay at a B&B and why it's the perfect option for the new normal getaway. And when you read that, you can see down in the second paragraph, we really want to highlight in all the marketing that we're doing and making sure that we're calling out not only the superior level of high touch comfort and service that inns and B&Bs offer, but also working in, with a safe and much needed getaway, really making sure that we are calling out that B&Bs are a safe choice when travelers are choosing to travel again. And this is something that we're going to continue to do through different surveys. So we asked Innkeepers, because we know it's important now more than ever to stay focused on your marketing for when that wave comes. And what I thought was interesting is when we asked Innkeepers, have you increased or decreased your marketing during these uncertain times, that 42% of the inns said that they didn't make any changes. And there could be several reasons why they didn't. Of course, for the ones who still don't know what to do, we can reach out and we can discuss different options. But the 42% who have done nothing are the ones who are sitting on the beach, and they're going to be watching their competitors riding the waves in. Now, of course, there's a percentage that have had to decrease, and that could be because of financial reasons. And I want to talk a little bit about the ones who have increased it and some of the things that they've been doing. But before we get to that, I think, a big part of this comes down to the finances, right? We've had Innkeeper share with us the amount of lost revenue that they've had over the last couple months and from cancellations and future bookings. And I was curious to know, for the properties who've seen that decrease in revenue, how many of them have reached out for available assistance. And one of the things that continues to inspire me on a daily basis is the amount of resources that are out there. And not only the amount of resources, but the amount of resources that are out there for different types of lodging, different types of self-employed people, like the musicians that I work with who've never been able to claim unemployment and now can for the first time. And I think it's really just, it's fascinating, and it brings a lot of hope that there is that support there. And everybody wants to see everyone to be able to continue to succeed as we move through this process. So we can see quite a few properties that responded have asked for some kind of assistance. So before I move on to that, there was one poll. Actually, I'll go back to that one. I'm going to launch this one first. So if you are one of the properties who did apply for the loan, I would love to know if you've received your assistance. So it's one thing to apply, but have you gotten the assistance? Because we've heard from multiple properties, I've heard from so many of my friends who had to claim unemployment that they applied, they did the right thing, but they still hadn't received it. So it would be great to see from all of you if you've actually gotten the support that you had applied for. So we've got about 48% that have responded. And one of the things that I want to point out, because also, you know, here at bnbfinder, we had to also make some adjustments, and I've been doing a lot of the marketing. Our small but mighty team are all jumping in, and it really feels like, you know, the old days at the beginning of bnbfinder.com, where we're all working together and we're all working really hard and really using all of our resources that we can. And, you know, when I look at the opportunity and I see the paycheck protection, I'm actually going to share these polls and share the results. So the paycheck protection, I think, is a really important one. And if you're a seasonal property and you haven't applied for this yet, that particular assistance is for you to be able to get the funds to be able to pay your employees. And I wasn't involved in the actual application and all of that, but what I do know is that that is 100% dedicated to paying employees, and that's what it needs to be used for. So as you're thinking heading into your season and bringing back some of those seasonal employees that you've had, and being concerned that you might not be able to afford them and getting prepared for that, I think that's definitely something to look into and to look for. The EIDL loan advances, those loans generally typically are loans that, and small business loans that you can get and pay back at a very low percentage, 1-2%. So if you haven't looked into it, look into it. I am thrilled to see that folks are starting to see some of this come back and that you're able to get some of that support again. So that is fantastic. I am going to go back just to one more poll that I meant to launch. And this is to understand, if you're not currently open, what month will you start receiving guests again? And the reason why I ask this is because there's a lot of properties who have chosen, and for obvious reasons, because they're focused on their fixed costs. So your fixed costs, you know, if you haven't gotten a mortgage deferment and you still need to pay that, you still need to keep the lights on, you're still living there, you still have some bills. So some have chose to close just to hunker down and wait until they know that guests are going to start booking. Some have been required to close down per the state. And so I'm just interested to see when you're planning on reopening. And we've got about 30% who have voted. That could be because of all the other properties who are currently open. So I'm going to just close this poll. We had a few more come in. So I'm going to close this poll and just share these results as well. So it looks like the majority of the properties are going to be opening over the next 3 months. It seems like June, and I've seen this before, is going to be a big month for us. So that is very exciting because that aligns with everything that we are seeing as well. So moving on. I had to just add this in because I have felt this way many times while we were waiting for to get loans back and talking to innkeepers that are waiting for this. So for those of you who haven't gotten back the loans that you've applied for, the assistance that you've applied for, you know, we're here for you. We understand. And as you can see, other folks are getting it. So I think everybody is just so overwhelmed and trying to get those out. So it is happening and they are coming and they will come. On the traveler side of it, I thought it was important just to highlight, because I know there's the concern and it's come up more than once, you know, will travelers have the money to travel? You know, they want to travel, but will they have the money? And more than half of the travelers that had responded have not been affected by their jobs. They are still looking for packages and deals because everybody, you know, will be price conscious. So it doesn't mean that you need to put in deep discounts, but you can start to think of, you know, discounts for returning guests. You can think about, you know, different ways that you can put together some value-added packages and really selling the value that you have at your property versus just going in and doing a discount. So when we ask the innkeepers what you're doing for your marketing, we asked if you've increased, so for those properties who said they increased their marketing, we asked them how they've done that. And what's really interesting here is a couple of things that I want to point out is that not all of the marketing that you're doing has to be directly out of your pocket, right? So for example, yes, of course, Google PPC, there's going to be a cost immediately involved in there. Directory participation, there's a lot of directories, just like with, not a lot of directories, we're one of the few only directories left, but there's a lot of marketing channels and there's a lot of things right now that you can take advantage of that are giving 3 months for free or giving a free trial and not charging until August, things like that. So, you know, think about looking into those so you can start to get that immediate exposure, especially if we know that June is going to be the month when we're going to start to see a lot of this turning. And also 2 things I want to call out on here. Clearly offering packages and discounts and the ways that you can communicate that to your travelers, but also more blog writing and newsletters. You know, these are the things, and I think about myself when I was up at the Inn at the Round Barn in Vermont from 2012 to 2014, running that property, and I always wanted to do blogs. I thought, yes, this is great, but I never had time to do it. So now is the time to do the things that you haven't had time to do. And when I think of blog writing, one of the things that I've adopted here at bnbfinder is I have reached out to a couple of different resources. One's called Upwork, and I'm working with a couple of others and generating some content. And my goal is really to have our social marketing and all of our marketing that we're going to share through newsletters really built, written, and ready to go, so that when you do get to the point where you have less time, you won't have to worry about taking the time to go back and, you know, schedule those blogs or write the blogs. It's more the writing and the building of them that takes the most amount of time. So if you have that in there now and you can schedule it for the future, that's awesome. Also, tapping into your traveler database that you have in your property management software and newsletters. You have, there are 25% of the properties who said that they are using their newsletters. And I've seen some really creative ways that they've used them, and I'm going to share that with you in a minute. It's important to remember why travelers continue to choose B&Bs. And the top 3, you know, more relaxing for romance. Everybody's going to need to relax after this. Free breakfast and refreshments. So again, talking about your value adds, what's included in that cost, and in everything that you're putting out, really sharing, you know, not only that, you know, we have free breakfast, we're going to deliver it to your room, etc. And simply because travelers prefer B&Bs to hotel, and Then the safer and more friendly, and enjoy meeting the innkeepers. So when I think about enjoy meeting the innkeepers, 42% of travelers, and this has been consistent since we started running these surveys, is that travelers continue to travel to B&Bs because of you. So this is also a great time for you to be reaching out and sharing where you're at. Because on the traveler surveys, I didn't put it in here, but so many of the responses that come for the travelers are all about how much they care about you, thanking you for all of the experiences and memories that you've created over the years from them. So they want to hear from you and they want to see how you're doing. So I put together a couple of ideas that I've seen recently from properties. One I want to mention that's not in here just yet is one of our members had reached out to me last week, and she finally was able to take future reservations. So she was so excited. She said, you know, I put together a newsletter. I already had it written because I knew I'd be able to start taking reservations. I sent it out the day that I could. She sent it out at 8 in the morning. She's located in Missouri. Sent it out at 8 in the morning. By noon, she already had 12 room nights and $1,200 in booking revenue within that short amount of time. So it's really important, again, that you're ready, because once you can send that out and guests can start booking, you're gonna see it start to happen. So this here is a newsletter that came from a property called the Aldrich House. And I've been following, I sign up for as many Innkeeper newsletters as possible. And so I get them daily almost. And what I loved about what they did is they not only had just the typical newsletter at the top, but then they also broke it down into little easily digestible boxes at the bottom of ways that travelers can help. And I thought this was just such a great, you know, idea of how to get their guests involved, you know, for their newsletters. Leave a review, don't just follow, share as much as you can, share with your friends. And when you look at some other data, I don't have it in this presentation, but I do remember it from the industry study, is that travelers trust other travelers, right? They want to see online reviews and they want to see third-party reviews. But when it's shared traveler to traveler, you have a much higher chance of converting that because they're getting that from their peers. And another thing that they did that I loved is this was the bottom part of their newsletter, where they reminded them to keep you in mind. So they were asking travelers, keep us in mind, and that you can book with confidence. And it's just so easy to see, you know, these are the reasons why you should continue to book with us. You can be confident that we're doing all the right things. And it just, I was ready to book after I saw this. So I wanted to just share that one. And also, if you're doing anything that is, you know, something you never thought you'd do, like this property in Lawrence, Kansas, who had a wedding business and decided to convert to drive-through weddings. This is not the first property that I've seen do this. Since this one launched and sent this out last month, or actually in March rather, I've seen more and more properties doing things like this. And so if you have anything that you're doing that is out of the norm, that you've come up with that's super creative, please email it to marketing@bnbfinder, because these are the types of things that I love sharing out in our social media and our blogs. We are dedicated to posting a new blog every day for the next several months and featuring that out through our homepage for inspiring travel. We are also continuing with Wheel of Fortune, and I brought this up because I just received an email from a property today who wanted to participate, so I wanted to give you all an update on that. So the Wheel of Fortune is currently not taping, but they are seeking ins for their fall air dates. So we continue to build a library of properties who are interested in participating and being featured on the show. So if you're an active paid member of B&B Finder, you can participate. You can email me directly, and I just need your footage, and then I'll help work with you to put together a prize package, get your logo, and then we have everything that we need. So when the show does start taping again and they do start scheduling and they come to me and say, Janice, okay, we've got this many theme weeks ready to go. who do you have for properties? I'll have my library of all properties who committed to participating, everything we need to get that sent out. And that is a huge way to get a great amount of exposure, and something that a lot of folks won't have the opportunity to participate in. So I wanted to also mention the importance of partnering with your associations. We're partnering them both with on our site and social media, anything that we can do to help send out those messages and repost those messages. If you have any social posts that you've put out recently that you'd like us to share out through our channels, again, email marketing@bnbfinder. I'm happy to slot those in however we can with all of our other posts that we have. We are listing all of the innkeeping associations on our site and trying to get as much exposure there. And we are also going to be bringing back, if you didn't have a chance to attend the last webinar, I announced this then, so I wanted to put this in here because this is really important, because we had run previously at bnbfinder.com a best breakfast tournament, and it got incredible PR. And if we know that the #2 reason that travelers love to stay at bed and breakfast is because of the breakfast, what perfect timing to launch the best breakfast tournament. So we are in the process, I'm working with Marty Main right now to put together the contest. You're going to be receiving an email, all of the members on the call in the next couple weeks of how to participate. And it's going to be awesome because we're not only going to be doing the best breakfast contest, but we're going to be bringing back the top 10 US B&Bs, top 10. We're thinking about the top 10 beach B&Bs. That might change depending on where different restrictions are, and we'll be sharing out all that information with you. So ways that you can stay up to date. If you haven't set up Google Alerts, I highly recommend that you do because of all the information that's being shared. I have my Google Alerts set up. I get them once a day. You can choose to have them once a week. And what it does is it just tells Google to go out, depending on the keywords that you put in, and to send you in one email all the articles that are related to those terms that you asked to have reported on. So it's a nice way to keep organized on what's happening out there in the media. And it's also a great way for you to be able to pick up articles and get inspiration from what other innkeepers are doing and when they get pickup and things like that. So as a reminder, focus on the goals that you would set at conference, like I mentioned at the beginning, and trying to really hone in on the things that are really important for you and your marketing over the next couple weeks. Because if everything comes in as it's being projected to, and travelers start booking and start traveling again in June, making sure that you have your goals aligned are extremely important. Of course, we are all in this together, and we all are stronger together. Connecting with your national and state associations. I wanted to bring this up because I was thinking about a couple of the conferences that would normally happen this summer in some of the southern states with some of the associations that have had to been postponed. And ALP, which is our new national association, it's both PI and AIHP, for those of you that aren't aware, have come together to form ALP. And on March 6th, they did a virtual development day with several of the leaders in the industry. Unfortunately, I couldn't participate that day, and I sent a message off to Chris to find out, is it possible for anyone who didn't participate to be able to get recordings? And they have over 10 hours of sessions that they did. One of them is another great presentation that Scott and Allison from Whitestone did that has, it's a more data-driven, similar to what we did here today, but with some different data points. And if you didn't have the chance to attend, you can still purchase those. I think it's $49 for all 10 hours. And I know we're getting just a little bit over time, but I would be remiss to not mention the Book Direct movement. And if you haven't been involved in this, this is what was set up by Lisa from Acorn and PI and AIHP at the moment. And this is a great way for you to get involved, stay up to date on the latest news that they're posting around the CARES Act, around changes that Google is making. I know they just made an update to their algorithm last week again. So the easiest way for you to stay informed is to go onto their website. If you haven't done this yet, go on, sign up for their newsletters, subscribe, and you'll get all the up-to-date information. So I wanted to announce before we take up any questions and answers that came in, for all of you that participated in the survey, I cannot thank you enough, because the data that we get is only as good as the amount of properties that participate. And it becomes more statistically relevant when we have more participation. So we added in, because we know your time is incredibly valuable right now, as it is always, a $200 credit towards bnbfinder. So if the winner wasn't currently a member, we would apply that to a new listing. The winner was Pleasant View Bed and Breakfast, and so we extended that out to them yesterday, and the innkeeper wrote back a really sweet letter of how, you know, it's perfect timing, and receiving that support right now is really helpful. So I wanted to mention that for new members, we are running a promotion where you can sign up and not pay anything for the first 3 months. We do have different programs that we put in place for existing members who need some support and relief. So please reach out to us for anything that we can do, you know, as bnbfinder to help you through this time. So I know we've gone a little bit over. We've still got everybody on that started, but Tim, are there any questions that you want to answer personally, or ones that have come in that you think would be helpful to share at this time?
Well, I heard from one person who commented in approval on your comment on the newsletter, saying that they sent out a newsletter, and they sent it out on Friday, and within 3 days they've had 27 room nights booked. And in their newsletter, they just laid out how they, you know, reimagined their inn and the new policies, and people really seem to, you know, respond to that. So I thought that was very, very positive and great to hear. You know, I think other folks out there are still, you know, when they're in a destination that is, you know, part of the destination is, you know, maybe going to a concert or going to some of the restaurants in the area or some of the other sites where, you know, things are still up in the air. I think, you know, hearing some of the comments from folks that that's still very much a challenge when, you know, they don't have some of the activities in the area to do as readily available. And so, you know, just those are some of the, I would say, most interesting comments I've been hearing in the comments.
So I love that you just said that, because it sparked something that I thought of. And so pretty much everywhere, you know, it depends on whether your state is open or it's not open yet. Here in Texas, they opened Texas theoretically, but there are a lot of cities that are choosing not to be fully open. They open restaurants, and a lot of restaurants here in Austin are saying, you know, this is great, we're open, but we're still going to offer curbside pickup. And they started doing drinks to go when this all started, which is crazy. Everybody was like, this has never happened before. So you can go to your favorite restaurant, you can get a cocktail kit, you can get your favorite food to go. So I think on an inn's perspective, because so much of the experience, right, is going out into the community and experiencing what the restaurants have and going to different shops. So I think it would be great in your newsletter and even on your website to add in a section that talks about, you know, what is currently open, what restaurants are offering, you know, curbside service. Because, you know, we were talking again about going up to the Hill Country this weekend with it being Memorial Day, and, you know, started to investigate, okay, well, which restaurants that we love can we go and get takeout from? And you can go and you can have a picnic with your favorite food. So, you know, you can stay at your favorite inn and you can still get, you know, go to some of the places that you love. And here in Texas, they have opened some retail locations. So some of the little shops are open in Fredericksburg. There's fewer people who are traveling, so you can pretty much have the town to yourself, which is pretty remarkable. So I think that is a great point and should absolutely be included in your newsletter. So that's awesome. Great feedback. And one of the things that I wanted to mention is in the surveys that we got back, there was so much great information and tips from different innkeepers of things that they're doing. So I haven't had time to go through all of those because I've been going through the data, but my goal is to go through all of the feedback that you gave individually on things that you're doing, and put together a document with suggestions on things that other inns are doing and where they're located, and how you can share some of those ideas. And do we have any other questions that came in?
No other big ones. There was a question about, how folks were doing their marketing, but we answered it on the next slide. So if folks were doing more marketing during this time, we talked about that. So I thought, for that one, it was pretty interesting to see how little reliance or dependence or even just, I don't know, support folks seem to be getting from OTAs, just in terms of, where they're focusing marketing efforts. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But, I think all in all, I think it's pretty encouraging to hear some of the feedback we are hearing. I personally did go on a little getaway this past weekend. I actually traveled to another state, if you can believe that, folks. Went fishing for a couple days in Utah, and it was a very remote area where I was, but I have to say it was very nice to be out and to feel normal and to feel, like I was, I don't know, just able to go about life in a normal way for even a weekend. And so I do think, from my own experience, I think there is a massive amount of people out there that are incredibly, cooped up, wanting to get out, but just, not quite ready for it yet. And I think, they're looking for every and any sign of hope to suggest that that's, possible. And so, just know that when it does happen, and I think it will, it's going to feel really good for everybody, because man, after this last weekend, I felt like I was human again. It was pretty awesome. So anyway,
Yeah.
That's where
you just made me think of another idea, and that is, of course, because of my love of music. We've been having just 5 friends over the last couple of weekends, and a lot of my musician friends clearly are not playing music. And so we had a couple of them over this past weekend and the weekend before. And, they set up apart from each other and they played. And it was the first time that I've heard live music since all of this happened. And it was unbelievable. I thought, wow, how healing, beautiful, and wonderful it is to be able to sit here with a couple of my closest friends and be able to share in this moment. And then a friend of mine who's a musician just got called out for this coming Saturday out into Dripping Springs, which is out in the hill country. And one of their fans, who is a big fan of theirs, who goes to all of their concerts, he plays with a country guy out there. They wanted to have a small dinner for some of their friends. So they're having, I think it's 8 people for dinner, and they asked the band to come and play, and said that they would set up the stage far enough away and that the band wouldn't have to interact, get close, to the people who were having dinner. And so anybody who has had music at their inn before, or does anything like that, you could certainly put something together like that. Have it outdoors, have it where it's set up where, your guests sit, socially distancing apart, have somebody come in, play music. I mean, there's so many things that tie into other parts of the community that you could put together as different package ideas. So I know there's a lot, but for that, it's all inspirational. So I think it's wonderful. So I wanted to put up here some helpful articles and links that you can, that I found over the last couple of weeks that I thought were great. There are also more articles that are posted on a new page that we launched called the bnbfinder mission page. We're going to be updating that with articles, but there's just so much information. So here's my contact information. If there's anything that you need, we'll share out Tim's contact information too in the follow-up email. And just know that we're here for you. And both Tim and I have been in this industry for our entire career and are incredibly passionate about continuing to grow the B&B industry and to bring not only new travelers in, but to reinvigorate, our existing guests that have come and stayed for all of these years with all of you. So thank you so much for taking the time today, and we can't wait to talk to you all again soon.
Thanks for attending.
Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Bye, guys.